meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. I'm really excited today to have Jackie Polk on the podcast with me. I'll give you a few things to know about her before we get started, but she is married to an amazing man, Sean. Correct.
Yes, that is correct.
An amazing man, Sean. I love that. She's a boy mom of 8-year-old twins and a 2-month-old baby. So she is a busy mom also. And today she's going to be sharing her story. She's also just coming up on 6 years of being clean and sober. And she's willing to share her story. And we are so thankful, Jackie, for you to share your story of addiction recovery, foster care reunification, domestic violence, all of these things that many people in foster care have experienced. And I'm just so thankful that we get to hear from you, learn from you, and see that there can be beauty from ashes. So why don't we get started, Jackie? 8 years ago, you said you gave birth to twin boys.
Yes.
Let's just start there. My sister has twin boys. So I am immediately thinking back to seeing those little guys in the hospital. I want to hear about that day for you.
Well, there's actually a lot. There's a lot to that story, but I was actually even struggling through my pregnancy with substance abuse in the beginning of my pregnancy. I ended up in a rehab and I was clean after that. That's just a testament to the struggles of addiction in itself. Yeah. And I also had a surgery. Actually, the boys had a surgery on while they were still in the womb. Wow. It's pretty scientifically crazy. They were sharing too many blood vessels. And so one was like getting too much of everything and one wasn't getting enough. And so they actually cut me open and they went in and lasered off some of the blood vessels between them while it was at 21 weeks.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And then put me back together and they stayed in for another 8 weeks, but I was on bed rest for that whole time. And even during that pregnancy, I was still like mentally not well. And the biological their biological father was not present. He was part of the domestic abuse. And so it was not a great experience. That is for sure. They came at 29 weeks. So they were very small. They were 2 pounds and 11 ounces and 2 pounds, 10 ounces.
Wow.
Yeah. So they stayed in the hospital for a couple months, but they didn't really thank God they didn't have like a lot of health issues. They just had to grow and eat on their own. So they were there for a couple months and that was, I don't even know the word for it. A real roller coaster. That was very difficult. But I was just, I couldn't really believe that was my life, that I had twins at that point, and thinking back now that I have a newborn baby, I don't really know how I made it through those days of having two at all times.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was actually, I was still struggling. I mean, I had struggled for a long time and I was still struggling during my pregnancy and after the pregnancy because I didn't really get better. I just was going through life.
Yeah.
So they came home a couple months after being in the hospital. And I was clean for, I think, the first 8 months. 6 or 8 months. And then I ended up getting back together with the biological father, and it was all downhill from there. So, yeah.
Wow. Was anyone there with you when you gave birth to them?
My mom was. Well, actually, he was there for the first few hours or whatever, but my mom was there.
Okay.
I had been pretty estranged from my family for a long time because of the lifestyle I was living and the pain I was causing and just all of that. So I pretty much went through the pregnancy on my own. My mom was there after the surgery and through the pregnancy and stuff, but it was pretty much just her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're going to kind of zip ahead several months to 16 months later.
Yes.
Because that is really when foster care entered your story. Will you take us to that day?
Sure. That day was actually really traumatizing for me. It was a long process of things that happened. But long story short, the kids were removed. The DHS showed up at our house and asked questions. And at that point, I mean, I wasn't putting up a fight anymore. I wasn't denying things that were going on. Like, I needed help. I knew that I wasn't being the mom that I needed to be for them or the person I needed to be for myself. And so I didn't really fight it. It was my admittance that I needed help with addiction. And it was my admittance that there was abuse in the house. And so they went with a family friend first. And yeah, that was a really hard place for me to be, knowing that I was doing what I needed to be doing, but that obviously that wasn't the situation that I wanted to find myself in, Yes. Very difficult. But it was what they needed. It was what we all needed. They ended up with family friends first, and then they went to, the boys are Native and we live in Oklahoma. And so they actually went to a Native family, out pretty close to us, like 45 minutes away from us. And that's Bobby and Brittany. I mean, that's my story. Those are the people that, have supported us from day one. So.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm excited to hear more about that. But, did you have any idea this was coming at this point? Like you'd said, you'd kind of finally admitted. So were there other instances where DCFS had come or the state had come, or was this a big surprise?
It was not a big surprise, although
Okay.
I was actually blaming my mom, thinking that she's the one who somebody told. I felt like somebody told on me. And that was actually not the case. Thinking back, once I got sober and really got to think about how things played out, it was actually that there was a really big domestic violence call. Like, there was a thing that happened between him and I, and the cops were called out, and it was a whole thing. He was arrested, and I ended up, that whole situation was very traumatizing in itself. But I ended up going up to the courthouse afterwards and basically dropping the charges. I don't know if you or any of the viewers that are watching this are familiar with battered women and how that goes, but basically, standing up for them and saying it wasn't a big deal and it's okay, and just stuck in that whole whirlwind of things. And so me doing that, and they knew they were there, they knew there were two babies there. That was what happened when I went and dropped. Yes, I basically was like, no, it's fine. And it was like, no, that's not okay. So that's when the situation was kind of brought on. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So how does that feel to see your babies being put in a car and removed from you and not being able to do anything about it?
So that was heartbreaking and the most kind of helpless that I've ever felt, for sure. And even in that moment, it wasn't all sitting with me. I couldn't really grasp it. Number one, I wasn't sober. I wasn't clear-headed, but it was also so surreal that it almost was like I was watching something happen instead of actually being there. And this is my life and this is my body experiencing this situation. It was heartbreaking and it was hard, and I felt defeated. actually in that moment, I didn't feel defeated. It was like the weeks and the months after that, I felt defeated. Yeah. But that's when, I mean, no matter what kind of parent you are, like when you have somebody taking the kids, like you're not fit, you're not able to, we're going to take care of this because you can't, is just a real, and it was true, but it was still felt like just a kick in the gut, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. So how much time then passed from when they were first removed to when you first got an opportunity to speak with the foster parents who were caring for them?
So it's really weird. I actually just replayed this whole timeline of events with my husband recently, which I guess I have kind of removed myself from because it's so far in the past.
Sure.
But when I first found out they were moving from the first family over to this family, I actually had reached out to her. Brittany is the mom's name. And I reached out to her and sent a bunch of messages, like didn't really know her, but had her phone number and didn't really hear anything back. And so I followed up on the next day and I was like, I know you might not supposed to be talking to me yet, or it's not finalized, this and that, because I know there's a lot of behind the scenes that go on. And that's pretty much what she told me, was like, I'm not supposed to say much, but yes, I have them. And yes, they're safe. And, and I didn't know them. Obviously they were okay because, I mean, whatever, they're checked out and all of that. But when your kids are somewhere that, you don't know them, it was like, that was my lifeline, it was like me connecting with her on the phone and asking. And, I mean, shortly after that, she was great. She sent me pictures. She would send me, a text about what they were doing and just all of that, which was really helpful for me and my peace of mind, for sure.
Absolutely. And I think even just that, because it is way too easy for us to villainize parents who've lost their kids into foster care, right?
Right.
And the reality is, there are people who are struggling. No one wakes up and says, I sure hope I'm going to lose my kids today. Right? You were struggling through addiction. You needed help.
Right.
And help came in this form, which is a hard way, but it didn't take away your feelings of love and wanting to make sure these kids were safe and all of these realities that a mother feels, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And honestly, it wasn't until long after I was well on my way to getting them back that I really saw it as a blessing for all of that, because you're just putting up a fight kind of, what I mean? It feels like you're fighting consistently. And like a lot of factors play into that, of whether like how I felt, how any of the bio parents felt or feel. The foster parents play a huge role in that. The caseworker plays a huge role in that. But it's just feels like you're fighting at all times, and you just have to get humble, and you have to humble yourself, because there's no way to make it through actually fighting the system and saying, I was done wrong. At some point I had to say, no, I did wrong. And this was my part in this. And it's on me to get well and get better and do better. And that accountability, that accepting of the circumstances when they're so heartbreaking and so heavy, so in a place that you never really expected yourself to be, is really that. I feel like that was the biggest struggle for me, getting to the point of understanding, like, this is where I go forward. This is where I stop fighting and I just do what I need to do. For sure.
It was actually giving up that gave you the freedom to go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a pattern that I play in my life consistently, including with addiction, and just giving up the control of how things are going to play out and how I think they should play out, and how, it's not all on me,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Isn't it, there's a freedom that comes with that, isn't there, of recognizing I did wrong. I mean, I think of that in many ways, small ways or big ways, when I've done wrong, when I've been unkind, when I've, whatever it might be, when I actually acknowledge, okay, I blew it here. there's like a freedom that comes instead of going, well, it was like you said, like it's their fault or blame shifting, or that doesn't actually bring us the freedom in any circumstance that we actually are longing for.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with that. And it took me a long time to realize that pointing the finger out at somebody else and finding blame in somebody else is really just pushing you back from where you're trying to go. And in a situation like I was in, or any other bio parents, it's like your instinct to point the finger at that point.
Yeah, because it's also such a massive thing. It's not just a little thing. Well, it's a massive thing. So you're like on survival, like fight, flight, right?
Yes,
mode.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's like that's all that matters when you're in that sort of situation. It's like everything that's going on in life, like that's all that matters. Like that's the focus, or that's what's going on. No matter how hard you're moving towards getting the kids back or not, like that's what's right there. That's what's in your face. The reality of it, really.
Yeah. So, when they were taken, I mean, you were able to find the foster parent, but what kind of information, if any, were you given about where your kids, especially in those early days, where they went, when you might see them again, anything?
I wasn't really, I don't remember. I don't know the kind of information really that I had. I didn't. So technically were a family member of the biological father, I didn't know them at all.
Got it.
No, not at all. And so I guess, and obviously his side of the family, I can't feel that great about it because of him. So I don't know. I don't really even know the answer to that question. It was kind of, thinking back now, it's excruciating not knowing where your kids are.
Right.
The pictures, she sent me a lot of pictures, and that's what I have a lot of foster parents that ask me, how can I support the bio parents, on my social media and stuff. Yep. And that's one of the things I always tell them is just communicate with them, or at least show them, let them see them even through a picture, and I don't know what kind of stipulations there are or anything like that, but, it was just a calming feeling when I could just lay eyes on them,
Yep. My husband and I were foster parents for a few years, way back in 2010. And we were able to really build a relationship with our kids as birth parents. And we sent pictures, and their kids became our kids. It did move towards termination, and they actually surrendered rights. However, even for years after, I would send picture books, at Christmas or things like that. And their mom would just tell me over and over how much she appreciated that. So I'm thinking of her as you're saying this, and I can only imagine. Yeah, you can look and you can assess as best as you can. Are they healthy? Are they safe? They're getting to do fun experiences, or that would bring calm.
Yeah, definitely. And you can pull out the picture anytime you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when did you get to see your boys after they had been removed? Do you remember how long that was?
I'm trying to think. The case started in March, and their birthday's in April. It was their second birthday was in April. And I remember bringing little presents and cupcakes up to the DHS visitation place and sitting there and singing happy birthday. Haven't thought about that for a long time, but so, that was just, 4 weeks later or whatever. That was my visitations at the actual, supervised at the office. And I never missed one. I never missed any of my visits. Not one time did I ever miss a visit. And I tell foster parents that too, because they ask me a lot of questions. And I try to help the best I can, but it's that's the one thing that if a parent is really trying to make it work and get to where they need to be, missing visitations is a clear-cut sign on one way or the other. And I'll be honest, I was not even sober for a lot of the visitations because I was still working on that part of the puzzle piece.
Yep.
But it was supervised and it was in the safe location, and that's where it was. And I wasn't going to let that stop me. I wanted to go see my kids. And so I did. Yeah. And I think it was just once a week for a long time.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
How is that to be visiting with your kids while you know you're being watched and assessed? How does that feel?
Honestly, that depended on where my mindset was. Like before I reached that point of like acceptance, it can be kind of like a battle. It can feel uncomfortable. It can feel, just like a little kid almost, like I need to be watched.
Yeah. Yeah.
Belittling, I guess you could kind of call it that, even though that's not what it was. That's not what they were doing, but that's how it was kind of feeling. But then once I reached the point, and for me, it's kind of different because I was just so grateful to be where they were. Like I didn't really care that
who was there.
Yes, I didn't really care. But then once I crossed that border of accepting that this is where I am, this is what the deal is, it just was what it was at that point, and I knew deep down and in my heart that I was going to do everything I had to do to get them back. And so even though I couldn't see where that ending point was in that moment, it was like, I'm okay. We're okay. We're just going to go forward.
Wow. That's awesome. Okay. So you mentioned these foster parents and how they were huge. What were some things that they did that were pivotal for you in showing you support?
Well, in the beginning, it was just, Brittany was always so sweet to me. She always showed up. She was always there a little bit early. And so I got to see them for a few minutes beforehand. Eventually down the road, she had offered, you can come out to the house more often. You can meet us out at this place where we're going. They just made sure that I knew that the boys were the most important. And the other thing was that even in my mind, so like I said earlier, they were technically family of the biological father, but they had pretty much let it known early on that they weren't going to be influenced by that side of the family. They were just doing what was needed for the boys. And I think that was a conversation that we had during all of that. I know that's a conversation we've had since. But I just always got that feeling. I always got that feeling that that the boys came first, and it wasn't about like whose side they were on is kind of how that was. It was pretty much like, if you get your life together and do what needs to be done for the boys, like we support you, and so,
and that's huge.
Yeah. I mean, the people that have your kids, they have so much, I don't want to call it power, but they have so much influence over what happens, over how you feel, over how the kids feel, just over a lot of things, so over how the caseworker sees your actions, and I feel very, very fortunate that they were the people that had them, because I know that's not the situation always. And I know some foster parents are very guarded when it comes to the bio parents and all that, which I understand, but I'm just really grateful that they were just so loving through the whole thing.
Yeah. Do you feel like that contributed to you kind of staying positive and keeping moving forward?
Oh yeah. The fact that they had the same goal of reunification, and not that they were kind of like, I don't want to say hoping I would fail, but like hoping that they, that they were going to,
they would adopt
the boys or keep, that they would become theirs. And, yeah, absolutely.
I think that's huge, because I think it's all too easy, especially and this is one of the reasons we want to bring awareness, because it's too easy to go into foster care thinking I'm here to save a child from a very bad person. Right.
Right.
And that really isn't the truth. That we're here to support a family, to be a place that the kids can be safe while mom or dad gets healthy, so that they can get them back.
Absolutely. And I think what gets lost there is like an expectation of a time frame for the parents. So even me, myself, like I was I was stuck in a place that was unhealthy. And I, being in a domestic abuse relationship, I didn't have money. I didn't have my own car. I didn't have a phone. I didn't have, my family was already secluded from me. I didn't have anything, it was like he made everything about him and his life and whatever. And then it takes a lot to get out of a situation like that. When I did get out of it, it was very traumatic. It was another whole ordeal with the cops and me jumping out of a second story window and like literally fighting for my life.
Stop it. Okay. You've got to go back a little bit on this.
Yeah, I know there's a lot, there's like just a lot to my story. The night that I did finally get away from him was, it was a fight, a physical fight, like it always was. And we lived in a garage apartment that his parents owned. So I'm just going to throw this tidbit in there, and I don't even know if you'll put it in or what, but, his family was very enabling for the unhealthy lifestyle. And so that's kind of how we lived. That's how we survived. That's how we were stuck in the addiction and the drugs and the toxicity and all of that. So anyway, it was his parents' garage apartment that we lived in. And so, yeah, it was a fight. It was a brawl. And I remember the moment that I felt to myself, I was like, I am done with this. Like, I'm trying to get the kids back. He wasn't trying to do anything of the sort. He wanted to use the kids as pawns to manipulate me, all of that. And I was done with it. And so I knew it. I was like, this is it. This is the time that I'm going to get out. And so he tried to block off the stairs. And so I went over to the window and I climbed out of it and I held my hands out of the windowsill and I pushed off of the house and I hit the ground on the gravel. I got up and I ran towards the street. He came down the stairs and ran after me. He actually pulled me down from my hair onto the ground. And we had a brawl at that point right outside the house, and it was right next to a fence. And so I actually dug my feet underneath the fence and held onto the fence while he's trying to pull me back into the house.
Oh my goodness.
And we lived in an industrial park area, so there wasn't like a lot of people that would go by. And it just so happened that there was like a little girl, she was like 10 or 12, riding on her bike right then and there. And I was I was like screaming and hollering. And when she saw him and he saw her, he let go of me for a split second. And so I hopped over the fence and I ran that way where she was at. She had a phone. I called the cops, told them what happened. And that was it. That was the beginning of the end of getting out of that situation for me. And that's extreme. That's traumatic. That's a lot. Like that's and that would happen a lot, and I didn't even have anywhere to go. So I didn't even know what I was going to do. But that brings us back to the beginning, was that it takes a long time to get out of a very toxic, unhealthy, unwell situation. Yes. It takes a lot.
And that was one piece of it. That wasn't the addiction. And that's a whole process to get out of. And yet through all of this, you still made it to every visit. That's incredible.
Yeah. I walked to a couple of them. We live in a smaller town. I still had to walk, I think it's, 3 or 4 miles to get there. And to my counseling appointments. I did have one good friend, one friend in that kind of lifestyle, and she had a car that she let me borrow. It was like a super old, really loud Bronco that was like, no, the windows didn't work, whatever. And I even had somebody be like, how can you drive that thing? And I'm like, I don't care. It's taking me to see my kids. Like I don't care. I'll get there. And yeah, there's a lot of pieces that go into it. And even that story in itself is just, that was like a 30-minute window into my life of living like that, Yes. Yeah, it's a lot.
And that is what we need to hear, because if that doesn't bring compassion for you, for what you were in at that time, then we need to examine our hearts, because why not? Right?
Right.
Right. I have never had to worry that I am going to get beat by somebody. I have never had to even consider that I might need to jump out of a 2-story window to save my life. I've never had to consider that there's not going to be a car there for me to go where I need to go. And those of us who have grown up like I have, man, if we're judging it's just so wrong.
Well, and it's that over and over and over again because like I grew up with a loving family. We weren't perfect. We're a little dysfunctional, but I didn't grow up in that kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
But things had happened in my life. I lost my dad when I was 19, which sent me down to like addiction in itself. And like just going all the way back to that, like I had a full ride to play softball at a Division III school. Like I had straight A's all through high school. Like addiction in itself doesn't discriminate. And then addiction will bring you to all kinds of places that you never even expected you to be. And that's how I found myself at the hands of somebody like that. And then I got pregnant and then it was whole nother layer of that. And it's just like, there's so many bits and pieces to people's lives, especially what gets them to the door of foster care and child removal and, and not having custody. Like there's just so many pieces to it that showing up just to judge from the situation that they're in right then is like not only not fair, it's wrong. Like there's just so much to it, it's just it's like a whole nother level of just like looking down on someone when you don't know anything about their situation from the past.
Everybody has a story.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's so not helpful. It's not helpful to the kids. It's not helpful to anybody.
To the whole situation. That's like what I always try to portray is that the whole situation in foster care in itself is so sensitive. It's so emotional. It's so, it's just so extreme, like there's so much on everybody. It's on all ends, the kids, the foster parents, the bio parents. Like, it's a lot.
It is.
And honestly, even the caseworkers in the system that sees all the kids consistently over and over again, like that's got to wear them down too,
Yep. You're speaking my heart.
Yeah.
So let's talk about, you did ultimately reunify. What led to that? And I know one big piece you said was a switch in your mindset. Maybe you start wherever, but I would love to hear, was there a moment where it just kind of switched in your mind, or was there something that led up for you to really kind of accept the reality and then move forward? Or how did reunification happen?
No, it was actually just little bits and pieces of my plan, honestly, coming to place. Like the plan that they write you up, you have to have a job, you have to have money, you have to have a safe place to go, you have to have food, you have to have, all this list of things. It was like kind of like a checklist for me as I would go through and get them done. And you asking that question to me, when I think about like, I had re-gotten my job at Chili's. So I had worked at Chili's a long time before that, before I couldn't work anymore.
I love Chili's, by the way. I'm hungry, Jackie, right now. So.
Sorry.
It takes me back to college days when we'd eat at Chili's a lot. Anyways, move on.
Everybody loves Chili's, but in this smaller town, Chili's is like one of the places that's always busy. And so I had a good relationship with the worker, like the manager when I was still there. So he gave me a job there. The AT&T store was right next to it. I remember when I got some money and I went right next door and I got a cell phone. I remember when I got the apartment that we started in, I actually had somebody else help me with the money to fully secure the deposit and stuff. It was just a small little townhouse thing. It had 2 bedrooms. It was really tiny, but I remember sitting in there thinking like, I'm doing this, like, not just me. It wasn't just me. God had a huge role in everything that I was doing. But the fact that I was in a place like that I could call my own,
had to feel amazing.
Yeah. And it was just like a checklist, really, at the beginning of the checklist, it was all my domestic abuse classes, all my counseling classes. And I have to say, I had a counselor who was absolutely like a staple in me getting well. I get emotional when I talk about her because she changed my life a lot. So it was counseling, it was the classes, it was the NA meetings, it was a house, a car. Well, the car didn't come till later, but Yeah. And then after I had the house, once you get to that point that you have a safe place for them to go, and then I had food stamps. So I had food. Once you get to that point, it feels like a win because you have somewhere to bring them once the trial reunification starts and they can come stay overnight. Yeah. I remember actually the first time they stayed the night and my mom was there. So I wasn't given non-visitation or non-supervised visitation.
Okay.
But my mom came in town and stayed with me. So they got to stay for the weekend.
Oh, wow. How was that?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. I remember we carved pumpkins. Yeah. It was just really cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
I need to hear, I know that you're emotional, and so I'm just going to dig right into that emotion. But Jackie, tell me more about, because I think of our social workers, our counselors. Sometimes they're like, does what I do even matter? Does it even make a difference? What is it about her that helped you so much, that makes you emotional?
Well, she listened to me. I guess it makes me emotional because she was with me through the hardest time I've ever had,
Yeah.
And she, I felt like she really knew me because I got to just lay it all on the line. There was nothing to hide anymore, she knew all my secrets. She knew what I was going through. And she helped me process a lot of the things that I didn't know how to process, like when you're going through something like that, I couldn't imagine not having professional help for that, because there's just a lot of layers to that situation. But even myself, never really having counseling or therapy, it was life-changing.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think I am just struck over and over and over when I hear stories and when I hear from people. So many times it's the things that do bring that emotion, that means so much, that was like the game changer, is when somebody else said, I see you and I care about you and I'm with you. And isn't that what we need as humans? Like, no matter where we are, we need to know we're not alone. We need to know that there's hope. And I mean, that is our heart at TFI. We want everyone in the foster care community to know they are not alone and that there's always hope in Jesus, because he is the one who actually always sees, who fully understands, and who deeply, deeply cares for all. But as people, we get to be a representation of Jesus, and that counselor was that for you. She was someone who listened, who sat with you, who cared for you when you said probably some really hard things to say. And that's beautiful. And I want to remember this, and I want our listeners to remember this, that we so often put all this pressure on ourselves to be like the savior, or to be like, we have to do these big, big things to help people, or to make a difference. And I'm just over and over and over reminded, it's those tiny little things. It's the making eye contact, smiling at someone, asking someone how their day is, listening, sitting with, or being quiet and just being, I think let's, as people, just remember that we don't need to overthink these things. We just need to show people care and love in the way that we would want to be treated.
Yeah,
as well.
Absolutely agree. For sure.
Thanks for sharing that. Whenever I get tears, sorry, but I just have to go right in.
I know. Well, there's been a couple times that I could have, and I started to, but I think now that I'm this far, 6 years into all of this, it's definitely easier to talk about and to share, and without breaking down, and even revisiting some of those moments that I haven't really revisited in a long time. It's okay. I still feel very emotional about it, but I'm usually an easy crier, and I didn't do that yet.
I'm with you. And I appreciate that, because I know it's heavy, and it takes a toll for you to share your story. And I'm thankful for that, because I do believe it's going to really help people. help our listeners and those that they share it with. So let's talk about when you heard, okay, judge is changing the order. You are going to be reunited. Let's talk about that day when you hear the news, but also when you actually get to be reunited.
So I remember the courtroom. I'll tell you that much. I remember the courtroom for the whole thing and the judge. But honestly, I think that he was there for a lot of the courtroom proceedings, even though he wasn't doing his side of things.
Oh, wow.
And so, so I had a protective order against him, but I guess which is a weird thing that in the court system, they're still going to put us in the same courtroom.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And I was still very traumatized. I was still very PTSD, a lot of things going on. And so anytime I had to be where he was, and there's actually even another layer to this story. There is another layer to it. But he, in the protective order part of things, after that situation, when I jumped out of the window, he had a domestic abuse charge after former conviction because of the previous one that he had on me. So he had a felony domestic abuse charge. And I was trying to get the protective order, but they can't give you a protective order for sure until the felony is taken care of. And so I had to show up at court every month for 18 months, I think, that his lawyer pushed out this felony court proceeding. And he pushed it out, hoping that I would just stop showing up. Because if I didn't show up, the victim doesn't show up, then whatever, it goes away. So in order to get this protective order, I had to show up for his felony thing, and they pushed it back every month for 18 months. And then eventually he got probation for 5 years, whatever. And then they could do the protective order after that. So they finally finalized a protective order after that. And that was like a whole nother layer of that took another layer of strength doing that. Yeah. And again, I just have this determination inside me, I guess, because at that point I was like, I'm not going to let him get away with this again. I'm just not going to. And if I don't show up and if I don't go through the anxiety and the heart palpitations while all this is going on, he's going to get away with it and nothing's going to happen. And so I did. I did. And so I was just very traumatized from the courtroom where he was in that whole situation. So you asking me about how that reunification in the courtroom with the judge and all that, I don't remember the good side of it. I remember the trauma and knowing that he was right there and doing this over and over and over again. So I don't remember that part, but I do remember when they first came to stay. It was it actually wasn't they were staying at my house from Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday and Wednesday already, for half the week. And so when that started to happen, I was just here we are, this is it, And then we just really slowly transitioned into, that was for 6 months that they were there with me for half the week. And then after that, it was just it just was normal. They were there for the rest of the week, and I had to get used to, to having them full time, but it was a really good, slow transition.
That seems really healthy. Yeah.
Yeah. And the cool thing about that is that even to this day, and I share this now on my social media, and I think it's super important, is that Bobby and Brittany, which is the foster care family that they were with, are some of our best friends now. The boys are actually staying there right now at their house tonight. They have a son that's 3 years older than them, and they all get along and play, and Bobby and Brittany are great. And the boys, I think for the boys, they don't really remember. They just know that they've always gone to Bobby and Brittany's, for them, I think it all kind of just goes together as one big thing. And I'm fortunate for that because they don't have a lot of the memory of why they were there. It's just that they still go there and we kind of do this thing back and forth. So it's very cool.
That is so cool. So life today, what's it look like?
Well,
obviously that you've got this relationship, which I love. You got a newborn.
Yes. So, I met my husband when we were getting well. He's actually also in recovery. So we have the same amount of clean time.
That's so cool.
And I I think I wrote Did I write Amazing
You
Man
did.
whenever I was
Yes.
Yeah. And that's because I appreciate everything about him from being in that relationship before.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
Yeah. So I know how fortunate I am now. But yeah, we have a home, we have cars, he has a really good job. I actually work from home. During doing network marketing and a lot of my content stuff, which is something I am really grateful that I get to do. And yeah, we found out we were pregnant in September, and it's really cool because it's like a second chance, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. That had to be a whole emotional thing in itself.
Yeah. 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 It's been a ride. Yeah. It's been really amazing. And getting the chance to do it sober and with somebody that I love, that loves me, and having the boys be excited about it. And I just, every day, I'm so thankful for my life.
I love that. Praise God.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow. Jackie, I am just sitting here intrigued by your story. And yet I know that this isn't just a story that you're sharing. This was the life that you lived. And there's a lot of hard fought lessons and things. And I'm so grateful you never gave up. I'm so thankful you kept at it. It's awesome. What do you wish foster parents knew about what it's like to be a mom in your situation years ago who lost her kids into care for a time?
Really just all the layers that go into it, all the layers that go into whatever the circumstances are, whether it's the people that are around, or whether it's, whether it's addiction, whether it's not having a safe place to go, just the struggle that it takes to get to that point. Kind of like we talked earlier about, people who've never even witnessed that side of life, it's hard to understand. It's hard to be empathetic. It's hard because it's probably easier to judge or easier to put them in a box or whatever. But there's just so much more to that, to their story, to how they got where they are, and to just not give up so easily,
Yeah.
Not that they do, but just to not give up the idea that they can get well, to not write them off before they really have a chance,
Right. And to cheer them on.
Yeah. Because it makes all the difference, because chances are good that they don't really believe in themselves at that point.
Yeah.
And so having somebody else believe in them, even beyond like all the evidence and stuff, it makes all the difference, having somebody have your back.
Wow. That's huge. That's so huge.
Yeah.
And that's something anyone can do. Care about that person. Be curious. Ask questions. Be kind.
Yeah.
Pray for them. Ask God to change your heart when you do feel, as a foster parent, when we were foster parents, it was this crazy emotional mix of, I want their parents to do this and to get them back, and we're going to cheer for them and encourage them. And I want to keep them, it's just this mix of like, I am loving this child and I don't want to lose this child. And so ask God to change your heart to really deeply love their parents, and to think about your story with Brittany and I'm forgetting his name. Bobby.
Yeah.
I have a Bobby. I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. But that could be your story. And it's so beautiful, right? It doesn't have to be Brittany and Bobby against Jackie.
Right.
It's a together thing.
Right. And I think one of the major things that they did too was that they allowed me to kind of show where I was first, like like I said, like showing up to the visitations and reaching out and wanting to see them and kind of like giving me the chance to show how I felt about the situation or where I was trying to go, as opposed to like just writing me off in their mind, like, oh, she's not trying to do it. You know, she's not going to do it.
Right.
And I know there was lots of people actually that had doubts in me, and, you know, they weren't those people. So
awesome. Thankfully.
Yeah.
As we close out here, Jackie, I'm going to just ask you to speak to your boys. What do you want them to know?
Oh my gosh. Like, should I say, like, I want you to, like,
talk? Just imagine that they're sitting right here and someday they're going to listen to this.
Yeah. That's another bridge to cross at that point.
I imagine so.
Yeah. Well, this is kind of easy because I do this all the time with them anyway, but, you guys know that you're the most important things to me, the most important people to me. You matter more than anything else in the world, and you guys come first. And I love you forever, and there's nothing I wouldn't do for you.
Wow. Jackie, I'm truly honored and truly blessed to know you. And I just thank you so much for sharing your story, and you're a really good mom.
Thanks. Thank you.
Way to
Thank
go.
you.
Truly. What
Thank
strength. You. Yeah. Way to go.
Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for having me on here. I feel blessed to be on here and be able to share it. I appreciate it.
Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.